All right. Welcome, Maximilian Payu, to the Nootralize podcast.
Thank you.
We are back after a bit of a break. Why?
Yes. I guess we both concluded that it was too much time sinking into it without any measurable payoff. And we wanted to focus more time on building our software.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those were two pretty solid reasons not to continue with it.
Right. So in your view, what has changed? Why is that not the perspective that we have arrived at after thinking about it again?
Well, I mean, this iteration of it, or if you'd like to call it an iteration or even a podcast, we're thinking a little bit more practical about it. We're being a little bit more practical about it. And basically we're not going to put as much time into it, make it a little bit more casual. And I guess that's mostly why we're seeing why we could make it viable, basically. But there's also the upside to it that we get to practice talking about it we talk about it, the business, Nootralize, the product development, everything every day, but you had at least some thoughts about practicing how to talk about Nootralize in a what would you call it? Not casual way, but in a official way, maybe. I'm not sure what the word is.
Yeah, casual, but still effective, so that people understand what we are about and why we can help them in their lives, really. But to do that, to efficiently communicate that, I think that we have to practice it a lot so that we get good at it.
Yeah. And hopefully there will be, we're gonna make it casual, and perhaps most of the content will only be you and me, our ramblings or discussions, perhaps some guests at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully, regardless of it only being you and me, we can have we can extract some high quality stuff from this.
Yeah, so we're planning on having our meetings, actually, the meetings that we have to, between us, communicate what we are going to do for the business, essentially, so what work we will be doing during the coming day. That is something that we do every day. We have a meeting every day where we discuss what we're going to do, and now we're planning on doing that on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So what do you say about doing that right now?
Sounds good. So what have you been up to lately?
Yeah, I've been entering data from a Blueberry study, so the effects of blueberries on cognition. And I have a question for you on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I should be able to share my screen to show you the study. And here it is. Share. Are you seeing the study?
Yeah. Yep.
Great. Okay. So I just finished it. So it's not actually in here anymore, but this is the study. So I'll get a link here, or rather I'll search for it in Deep Dive, which is the study search system that we are using, I guess. So this is the study in question.
I can't see right now.
You don't see it?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm seeing the systematic review of the effects of Blueberry on cognitive performance as we age.
Oh, screen sharing paused. Just a sec then. Resume share. How about now?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So this is the study. And we do have an inclusion criteria for our recommendation engine, or rather for the study inclusion for our recommendation engine.
Mm-hmm.
Or, well, I wouldn't call it an inclusion criteria, but we have a distinction as regards how we gather data, how we classify studies, and how our recommendation engine works. So the way our recommendation engine works in regards to age, the age of the participants in the studies, is that we have 3 age groups, right? We have children, adults, and elderly.
Yeah, and technically we have unspecified also.
Sure. What would that be though?
I think there are maybe a handful or less studies that actually didn't have that data point.
Okay, yeah.
So those would be unspecified, or yeah.
Yeah. Oh well. The question as regards age and our recommendation engine that I have for this study is, how should we classify the age group? Our criteria for classifying the age group of a study as elderly has been in the past that it should be 65 years plus, like all of the participants have to be older than 65 years for the study to be classified as having been done on elderly people. But here you can see that the participants are between 60 and 75 years old. Okay. The mean age is 67, around 67.
Okay.
We have it here somewhere. So my question is, because there are people who should, or rather are adults as we classify it. So they are younger than 65 and older than 18, which is the limit for being a child as we classify it. Because there are participants in the study who they are younger than the limit for elderly people. How should we classify this study? I think that we should probably classify it as for adults, because then we'll have a consistency. And even though the results may have a slightly better applicability to elderly people using our application, I think that in the long run, if we, in these circumstances, always make the decision that is aligned with our principles that we've laid out beforehand, then we'll be able to be consistent. And I think that's important, because if you're consistent with your methods, then you can know exactly what you've done and improve it in the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, if the rule is 65 plus and we take the average of all the participants, if that is the rule, then it is...
That is not the rule that we have had. Okay. So the rule we have had is, if there is any participant in the study younger than 65,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I guess we continue using that rule consistently
Yeah.
until we decide that it's not useful anymore.
Right. And I think there are loads of other things that are more important right now than switching up this system of how we classify people into age groups, because
Yeah. If this is the only study that it concerns.
I don't think so though, but still I think it's not a relatively important task.
I mean, spontaneously, I'd say I'm not sure if 60 years old is considered. I mean, I'm not sure even how like the Swedish government, what they consider someone who's elderly, or I don't know, businesses that have discounts for elderly people.
Right.
I'm not sure what the limit is.
I mean, the limit there is 65, but in the coronavirus situation, they classified elderly people as 70 plus, I think. So
Okay.
people who are 70 or above should take extra safety measures.
Okay, so definitely below 65 should be considered adult then. If you consider those.
Yeah, but the question is really, because the average in the study is like 67. Should we go for the average or should we go for the extreme limits? And I argue we should go for the extreme limits because that data is always available. We have always got the extremity, so the youngest person and the oldest person will pretty much always be mentioned. So between 18 and 25 years old could be a description of the sample group in a study. Whereas the average age of a sample group is not always available, in my experience.
Okay.
But I think that we could reevaluate this in the future when we think that it is something that is of a high priority. I also think that in the future we may want to implement for user profiles the age of the neutralized user so that he or she can well, it's not really for the user then, as much as it is for the purpose of science, really, so that we can enable researchers really to analyze the data of participants who voluntarily agree to share their data with scientists so that scientists can analyze, for example, how does this nootropic affect people who are in this or that age group. So in the future, I think that we'll want to reevaluate this age group topic and our stance to it. But for now, let's go with what we decided then.
Yes, sounds good.
On the topic of profiles, user profiles in Nootralize application, what have you been up to today?
So actually most of this day has gone to taking care of a dog, of a friend's dog. But what I have been spending time on is trying to model the relationship between what we call a measure and what we call a factor. Because we have made a distinction between those two, while they are, like, a factor is in a way a measure, but it also contains measures, right? So that relationship it's not hard to express it in code. I just haven't figured out yet how to express it in, like, how we store that data in the database. Because the issue that we were, or the thing that I had left on my list before I was going to go on to like deploying the complete thing was that I couldn't see the benefits like section under a nootropic, specifically lemon balm, and the reason was that those benefits came from measurements of factors. So apparently the factors were not, like those relationships in the database were not expressed correctly. And now I'm trying to find a solution to that.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense to me. I think that we have some points to clarify for the listeners though. So a factor is basically in some test batteries. So a group essentially of tests of a cognitive performance or mood that have been scientifically validated to work. So they're reliable and valid as regards that they measure what they are trying to measure. So test batteries contain a lot of tests of cognitive performance and mood. And then when researchers want to figure out what an intervention has had for an impact on the different measures of these tests, they group together all of the different scores on these individual tests of cognitive performance and mood into something called a factor. So it's the method for doing this is called factor analysis. So you combine several test scores into one factor so that you can have an easier time to understand the effects of an intervention.
Right, like a more user-friendly way of interpreting the results of these tests that were conducted.
Yeah. Usually I'd say that a factor it's better evidence because it has combined test scores than one test. But that of course does differ depending on what one is trying to measure, for example, and the quality then of the tests that the factor consists of. Okay. And to give the listeners a bit of background on what you are going to deploy as well.
Right. So the current version of the Nootralize application, which is available on beta.nootralize.com, is basically our recommendation engine, where we've gathered studies and nootropics, or studies on nootropics, and depending, like the functionality that we have is depending on what you would like to achieve, or what results you would like to achieve through using nootropics. You can get a recommendation. But now we have added on in the newest version of the newest iteration of the application, we have built in that you can create an account, and with that account you can enter what interventions you are using or which nootropics you are using, and then you can get like our analysis of your stack, so that you can see like these are the benefits that have been observed in studies, and these are the side effects, and that is just one of many features that we will, of course, build on this account or user feature. But that is the latest iteration. So that's what we would like to deploy now. And previously, this is very technical stuff, but the previous setup was very primitive or simple to have the app up and running. But now that we've implemented this user feature, we have to deploy some more, like a server and a database, basically.
Right,
And
and for
there is
people
some,
not acquainted with software development
yeah,
and web application development, deploying means basically publishing it online.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, basically, there's some we have to build some or yeah build or purchase some more infrastructure before we can actually like offer the functionality to our users.
Right.
I guess that's one way of saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you covered it well. So how is it going to, like, how well is it going for you, your current task that you mentioned?
Well, I was looking for a solution for it like most of the day yesterday, trying to like we're using a specific library for expressing relationships in our database, and they do have some solutions. So I think I've done enough research that I can like attempt to implement them now. So I'm not sure which one of them, like they have presented a few, and I'm not sure which one is the best for us, but I guess we'll try one and see like, okay, this makes sense. And then if it works, I think I mean, we don't have any like super specific requirements. We just want to make it work right now.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
like performance wise, there are no issues because we only have so many like factors. We don't have millions of records or anything. So I think we should just go with some solution that does the job.
Yeah. I agree. What you mentioned about the time aspect, like how fast we'll have it done. I think that's the most important thing. Essentially, we need to get our features out so that users can try them out.
Yeah, I think in most of our decisions, I think that's the highest priority, really.
Yeah.
Like we want to validate.
Yeah. So, how long would you say that I have to wait before I can see the next iteration live on
Live.
beta.nootralize.com?
Well, definitely today and tomorrow. If we get this solution done by today, and I can spend like the entire day tomorrow, most of the day tomorrow, with building our infrastructure in Amazon Web Services.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can be done by tomorrow. Like, it kind of depends on how much work I have to put into this relationship with factors and measures.
Right. All right.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
So,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
no, I was gonna ask you what, because between everything I got lost. What's on your agenda today?
Right. So I mentioned the data entry aspect of what I'm currently doing. So
Yeah.
I'm basically transferring data from studies on nootropics to our database so that we can use it to educate people about nootropics, both the benefits and the risks, and to recommend people the nootropics that are more or less evidence-based as regards specific benefits. So I'm transferring test data. So, for example, today I had in this Blueberry study that we looked at, I had the California verbal learning test, and then there were 8 different lists that the participants were given. and they were asked to immediately recall them, lists of words, and they were asked to immediately recall them after they heard them.
Mm-hmm.
So that tested the short-term memory of the participants after Blueberry use, and there was also a short delay and long delay recall task. So basically the participants were asked to, directly after they heard a list and after 20 minutes, both with help of a categorical cue. So basically the researcher told the participant what the category of the word was. So for example, this is the mug. So maybe the researcher said something that you can drink with. That was the cue. So participants were tested both on cued recall and free recall. So basically no cue, where they just had to recall it from their memory without any help. So on different time scales and with different amounts of help, the participants were tested so that the researchers who conducted the study could figure out how blueberries affected memory. And the tests were conducted at day 0 and day 90. So
Day
0 and day 90.
Okay.
It's essentially 3 months after using 24 grams of blueberries. The participants were tested on the same tests that they were tested on in the beginning of the study.
Were there any results?
Well, I do think that there were indeed some positive results.
I'm having blueberries every day now.
Are you having it every day, or are you going to have it every day?
No, I'm already having them for breakfast every day.
Nice. And how much do you think that you're having?
I think in one of the boxes it's 225 grams, and I probably consume one of those boxes in less than 10 portions. So I'm probably having like 30 or 40 grams.
Oh.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, they used a very specific standardized form of blueberries, but it should be, like, the purpose of the study was to see if easily attainable blueberry consumption would have any impact on cognitive performance and mood measures, and also some mobility measures and walking capacity measures on elderly people. So from my perspective, the objective of the researchers of the study was to figure out if the sort of consumption pattern that you have would lead to any cognitive performance boosts. Looking into the effect sizes that I calculated for the different test measures, so the different test scores for the California Verbal Learning Test, there were not very many effects that were far away from 0. So I guess just on a quick subjective level of analysis, I'd say that the false positives and errors that the participants did on this test, they were reduced. That would speak to having a better accuracy of cognitive processing, so that you don't make mistakes, really. Of course, this is just
really errors, total intrusions.
Right. I don't actually know precisely what this measure means.
Okay.
So the way I calculated it was basically, was that there was this name of the measure, and then there was data. So I don't really have to know precisely what it means, as long as I can figure out the direction of the effects. And sometimes that is very good. This one I could probably Google it to figure it out, just that I didn't do it because I wanted to save time. Sometimes it is very good, the methodology that we have here, where we do not have to know precisely what the measure means, as long as we know the direction of the effect and the effects for which it measures. So the effects to map this measure to. As long as we know that, those two things, then we don't really need to know what this measure measures. And that's good, because sometimes we don't have that information. Like it's not possible to attain it, because the researchers made up some tests. So there's no information on Google about it, because this is the only place where you could find it, like in the study. And oftentimes in those studies, which are of a bit lower quality, there isn't any description in depth about what it measures, except for on a very high level.
So, but the direction of effect for this measure is positive?
I don't think so, no.
No, okay. So, I mean,
we did have, like, I am certain that this is correct, because in the study they made it clear which direction of effect. Yeah, false. Which direction of effect is correct for the measure.
So it seems that was like the results are kind of inconclusive for this study.
Yeah, I'd say that indeed.
Because it had a negative effect on the errors, total intrusions, and then I guess the recognition false positives. That was a positive.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm interpreting that as a positive effect.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So indeed, inconclusive, this one study.
I mean, they taste hella good, right?
Yeah, I mean, they really do. Yeah, I don't think it is likely to do much of any damage, especially not in the 25-gram range. Like in that dosage, I don't think that dose, I don't think it's going to have any negative impact on anything that you might care about. That's my take.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna continue eating them.
Yeah, me too. Do we have anything else that we want to talk about?
No, I was gonna say I'm ready to go, so let's go.
Yeah, let's get to it. Let's
get it
back to working.
Yeah.
On the application.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, everyone who is listening, for tuning in. I guess we'll see our listeners tomorrow, Max. Is that true?
Yeah, we will.
Cool.
See ya.
See ya.